I know what you're thinking. Is this the booth, drafting the circuits, three-way theater, or the Kevin Jackson show? Well, to tell you the truth, in all this excitement, I kinda lost track myself here on whobazoo.com. So, do you feel lucky, punk?
My world when in the booth. The booth. This is all I do when in the booth. The booth. A set of headphones, one microphone, and yo, hold the phone, I'm in the booth. The booth. I share my world when in the booth. The booth. This is all I do when in the booth. The booth. I got one microphone, flow glitz in the zone. Yeah, I'm in the load me up, lock me in. I don't care, box me in, cause the booth got me in this brand new zone. Plug me in, turn it up, blitz gon' burn it up. Might start melting down the soundproof phone. It's one way, so it's one mode. Booth on the bus whenever I'm on the road. Lock in for days and anything goes. It's been 7 days, the same clothes. Still flowing for them dudes sitting outside on the blocks in the booth, but I'm spitting outside of the box. I know where the digits at, where the lyrics at. I ain't never losing, so I ain't gotta get it back. Got commercial music, but I still know how to spit it rap. I'm like the trees on my boots, I grew from the roots. If I'm lying, I'm flying, but I'm the truth. Only one way, my mobile or roam. I'm underground in the booth. The booth. I share my world when in the booth. The booth. This is all I do when in the booth. The booth. I got a set of headphones and one microphone. And yo, hold the phone, I'm in the booth. The booth. I share my world when in the booth. The booth. This is all I do when in the booth. The booth. I got one microphone. Yeah, I'm in the zone. Joe Spencer's in the booth.
Was he African?
African.
No. He was American, and he was like you. He looked just like you.
He was Jewish.
Just like you.
Okay, Jew.
Okay.
It's an odd crime for a Jew to commit.
Yeah, pretty docile.
Okay, so we have an African Jew wearing a hoodie.
No, you don't.
No.
No, that's not what I said. Is that what you heard me say? I said he looked like you. Do you look like an African Jew?
No, I look like a cop.
Yeah.
He was Caucasian.
Ken Diesel?
And good evening, everyone. Ken Diesel here. Hope everyone is safe and well, and echoing R squared. It's good to be back. Talk about a lot of very important things tonight.
In R squared, I'm going to let you go again. I don't think I caught you. I don't think you went out.
Oh, just wanted to
hello.
say it's great to be back tonight. We have a lot of important things to discuss, and I'm happy to be here.
And again, it's your boy Sinista1. Again, broadcasting live from the City of Champions. And like I said, we got a lot of new things going on. As you can see, we've got this video going out through OBS software, and it's in the making, it's in the workings, it's a lot of stuff going on. A lot of people in the chat already. Paul Forrest, what's going on? Shannon D'Amato, what's going on? Michelle Roberts, Brittany Marie, Melinda DeChristopher, what is going on? Melanie Richardson, Tyler Zanowski. We got a lot of stuff to talk about. It's Blackout Tuesday. I haven't posted a thing on social media. Everything I did today only had to do with this show. I actually just came back from being down at West Junior High where they had the Black Lives Matter rally, and there were a lot of people down there. Ollie Spears, John C. was down there, was talking. Rosie Vasquez Brown, a police officer, she was down there. Another gentleman, Brockton police officer, he was down there speaking. It was a good time. It was still going on when I left, but all I got to say is, hey, everybody, I need you to be safe, be peaceful, and we can't have what has happened at other places transpire here in the melting pot city of champions of Brockton. Boston was great. Boston was great for the entire day Sunday, with the exception of what happened at the end of the night. The only reason why I was so upset about that is because it just takes a few knuckleheads to ruin a great day. And here's the thing about this in Boston. Boston now, twice in the last 4 years, has shown up and has thrown away that whole, in my opinion, has thrown away this whole racist label that Boston has been labeled with for years since busing. We've done better than all of these other cities and states and things like that. It's nothing to be proud of. I'm just saying they've dropped that racist label here in Boston on this city so much. And we've proven time and time again that this city is not as racist as everybody wants to believe or say outside of here. Ken, I know you can speak on that.
Oh, absolutely. I think there's a lot of things at work here. First of all, I think there was a very poor snapshot of can't even speak. Snapshot of history regarding court-ordered desegregation. We're really only talking about a couple of neighborhoods, number one. Number two, since that happened in the early 70s, Boston demographically has undergone an incredible shift and has really increased its diversification. So you really don't have a black versus white issue. You have a lot of communities, Hispanic community, Asian communities, which comprised of Thailand, Vietnamese, etc., whites, coming into Boston and making it your own. Many of those challenges facing communities starting today, Boston went through in the 70s and 80s and had to deal with them almost 30 years ago. So after 30 years of work, you are now seeing the results of that, and it's a more peaceful Boston. Not perfect. Boston's got a long way to go. It's a lot more peaceful. And I got to hand it to the Boston Police Department and the state police. They've had a lot of experience in dealing with huge crowd demonstrations, and they've learned a lot, and now I think because of that are better able to deal with huge crowd demonstrations that could potentially turn violent. And I'll speak more about what happened last night later on the show, but it's a little more complicated issue than I think that first appears.
Great stuff. Again, also, before we get into the show tonight, I got to thank last week's guest, IAMAW business rep Michael Vartabedian, who came on to talk about employees' rights during this time. It was a great show. He's a union rep, and he came on to talk about workers' rights during COVID-19, why unions were so important. He also talked about workers' rights as we go back into the workforce, where there were some stories of workers being told that their seniority is completely erased. Everybody is starting off at the same tier, and he said it's completely legal for that. If you don't have a union binding job or a contract on your job, your employer can definitely do that. So be careful, be wary, ask all these questions, and make sure of it. Again, as you are looking at your screens on Facebook or wherever you're watching tonight, Ken Diesel on the left, R Squared on the right, closed caption in the middle, and I'm Sinista1 up at the top. And we got a lot of stuff to talk about. Quickly into the news booth. Brockton right now has a rally going on, peaceful protest at this point for the death of George Floyd. Organizers Deja, McCottrell, and Ollie Spears planned this protest. It was going from 5 to 7:30. I just left there. It was peaceful. The turnout was great. Let's keep it that way. Boston, as we just talked about Sunday night, they had their protest. It went well. It turned ugly in the end. Minnesota update, truck driver Bogan Vercherko, who drove his fuel truck on the I-35 freeway while protesters were there. I just want to give an update. He was released on no charges. Supposedly he wasn't sure of where he was or where he was going, and he accidentally drove up onto that. Do you guys believe that? Or I saw the video, and the video was scary as hell. He's saying he mistakenly drove up that on-ramp. Ken?
As a criminal defense attorney, I'm required to believe 6 impossible things before breakfast, but I'm sorry. If he were my client, I would say keep your freaking mouth shut and let me do the talking. No.
Did you see the video, Oscar?
I saw the video. First of all, I don't believe you can mistake an on-ramp for an exit ramp to begin with. But even if you did, how did you miss all the people there? You could see the people from the road. Nice try. No. Now, luckily, knock on wood, thank whatever gods or goddesses or divine creatures or non-divine creatures or no one out there, if you're an atheist, no one was killed. And I'm very happy about that.
Squid, want to add to that?
I would just say, look, I mean, obviously I don't know. I did see the video, and, you know, on the one hand, you know, who knows? There must have been a lot of confusion and chaos there. It's certainly hard to miss those people. The only thing that I can think of that would be at all possibly mitigating on his side would be that when he realized what he was doing, when he realized he had trapped himself, he panicked and did the wrong thing. It's not necessarily a defense. I'm just trying to figure out how the heck the guy could do that. And sometimes the best answer we have when people do something that doesn't look like it has an explanation is because they panic.
Right, exactly. A lot of people in the chat tonight. What's up, Michelle Roberts? Sean Galano, MMA fighter Sean Galano is in the chat. What's going on? Paul Forrest was here at the event also. Going on. Entertainment booth. No entertainment booth tonight. Worldwide. Blackout Tuesday. The show must be paused. Nothing coming out of the entertainment world. Sports booth. The only big thing to mention is Rob Gronkowski, who started the Bucks. Pretty much we knew this was coming. He walked away from his WWE 24/7 championship last night. He lost it in Foxborough. R-Truth, Ron Killings took the belt away from him and blindsided Gronkowski. And of course, there's no way the Bucks are going to allow him to wrestle in the WWE under contract with the Bucks. So right now, there's really not much else to talk about. Trouble booth and legal booth is what we're going to get into. This is why these guys are here. We're going to spend pretty much the whole hour on this topic of George Floyd. No need to explain as to what happened. I believe everybody knows the horrific photos, the horrific videos. I don't think there's anyone out there, which is surprising. I don't think there's anyone out there that has justified this. Usually people will say, well, he was passing a counterfeit $20 bill. You know, everybody jumps to that defense. Not many. It's very quiet on that one. A majority of people out there are sickened. And what surprises me here, guys, is two things. And we've talked about this on this show a couple of times. We talked about medical examiners and how they handle cases and how things are done. And one of the things we talked about is how medical examiners are hired by the state or the county or whoever. And we had mentioned sometimes that they could be tainted because of they're not like doctors and they're not held under oath.
Hold on a second. If I may, I don't mean to be pedantic, but we were discussing the difference between coroners and medical examiners. Exactly. Coroners are generally people who either elected or selected and with not any particular medical background. Medical examiners generally do have a medical background. That's the difference. Don't have to be pedantic.
But are they held to the same oath as doctors are, medical examiners?
Well, no, because their patients are dead. Because the Hippocratic Oath doesn't apply to a corpse. But you are correct. A lot of times people who work in coroner's office and medical examiner's office are subject to outside pressures that other doctors are not.
As we saw here on Netflix.
Right. Because whether you call something a homicide, intentional, or accidental can be very politically sensitive.
So the reason why I mention this is because the first examiner from Hennepin County reported George Floyd was on fentanyl and died of a heart attack. And because the cops did not know that he was having a heart attack is why he was died. Now, the first medical examiner did rule homicide. But the family and the attorneys for Floyd, they wanted an independent. The independent has come back and he has now said that he died from trauma to the windpipe and has said asphyxiation. All the officers here have said that they will plead the fifth. Can you explain that? Does this go in line with the blue code, guys, or?
Well, no, I don't think it goes along with the blue code. But the blue code or the blue wall of silence is the fact that when police officers will not rat on other police officers. Pleading the fifth means anything you say may result in a conviction or criminal charges pressed against you individually. I think that's the difference. I'm not surprised they're all pleading the fifth because I frankly think criminal charges should be brought against all 4 officers.
I believe that's coming. That's the rumor. That's the rumor.
That's the rumor. I'm only dealing with what has happened right now. I understand that only charges against one of the officers is being contemplated. I am unaware of any indictments that have come down against any of them. I may be wrong.
Well, I'm going to ask Squared this because the reason why they're saying these indictments may come down to the other 3 officers, I guess, after the whole Philandro Castile shooting, one of the things that came out of this, I guess Minnesota had put some rules and guidelines in place for the police officers that if you see something happening during an arrest or during where they have to take somebody in that's not right or where a person's rights are being violated, these officers have signed off on that they are to interfere in that, and they're saying that's what's going to happen here. I don't know if you're familiar with that, R-Squared or Ken.
Sure. But, let me just add my thought on the medical examiner thing.
Go ahead.
So we can stay past that. I think the medical reports are more similar than people want to believe. I think the media likes to play up this big dispute, and people are exploiting a big dispute. And I do think that there's some questions that need to be asked about the official medical examination, including the medical examiner's ethics. And I think there needs to be an examination into it. But that being said, both examinations, as you pointed out, concluded that this was a homicide. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean criminal charges. It just means homicide, meaning a man caused it as opposed to an accident caused it or self-inflicted. And so, so that's the issue. And the actual cause of death, the asphyxiation, the damage, the internal damage that he suffered, none of that is in dispute. The issue between the 2 medical reports is whether or not George Floyd had some underlying condition that the actions by the police officers exacerbated that they wouldn't have known about. And that's a legitimate dispute. I think the independent, first of all, you can ask questions about either one. I mean, obviously, they both have masters that they're serving, so to speak, and there could be questions asked, and I don't know. But at the end of the day, for me, it doesn't matter. I think the evidence is overwhelming that this could be a first-degree murder charge. As a career prosecutor, I would have filed a first-degree murder charge in this case, and I would have proven that he had the intent, that Derek Chauvin had the intent to kill George Floyd.
Wow.
We can talk about that later. I don't want to get too far ahead.
Yes.
But I just wanted to say that is based on both medical examiners' reports. I could make that case, is what I'm saying.
Really?
So now you asked about the other officers. So let me just jump on that real quick. So first of all, yes, that most jurisdictions, have instituted rules like that to try to get through the blue wall where officers try not to, so as Ken said, rat out other officers. I wouldn't call it ratting out. I would call it doing your duty. But the thing is, in a case like this, the officers had a duty, whether it's in their rules or not. They had a legal duty to act. They watched as Derek Chauvin killed George Floyd. And they have an oath. They have a duty as police officers to step in when they see something like that. So regardless of whether there's a special rule that was passed after Philandro Castile or any other reason why or any other rules that were passed, they violated that duty. That makes them guilty of a felony. Okay, they allowed somebody in their plain sight to commit murder, and that is a felony. And so these other officers are definitely going to be brought up. And there's no doubt in my mind that they're going to be brought up on charges. And Attorney General Keith Ellison, who's in charge of the case, in the next couple of days, I am sure will be announcing those charges. The question will be whether they will put it as third-degree murder or a manslaughter. And that just really, at the end of the day, they're still going to be charged in the death of George Floyd. It's just what the maximum punishment would be. And I understand that the family and some of the protests will never be happy with anything less than first-degree murder. But at the end of the day, they're going to be prosecuted, and all of them, I think, will be convicted.
Really? Wow. Because, see, in my opinion, I've been telling people that I don't think that they'll be convicted because I feel it will hurt people who you want them to become police officers. And if you have that stigma hanging over your head that any day you may make that critical mistake, you can end up in jail for that mistake.
But I agree. And I'll do this real quick. I see Ken has a point. Let me finish
Ken,
my thought real quick, and I'll back up. What I want to say is this is not making a mistake. This is not an oversight. This is not an accident. This is not something that any police officer can do. I have worked with law enforcement my whole career. I have the utmost respect for law enforcement. They do a difficult job, and the overwhelming majority of them do it incredibly well. It's the bad ones that ruin the profession for everybody and cause problems like this. So most police officers would have done the right thing and would not have been in this situation. What you have here is an extreme case, one that would not, in my opinion, happen that often, and in any case where it happens deserves to be prosecuted to the fullest. These officers watched Derek Chauvin snuff the life out of George Floyd. They watched it. Any one of them could have, and I don't know that we know everything that was spoken, but certainly none of them did enough. Not a single one of those other three officers did enough. At some point, they should have pulled him off of George Floyd. They should have pulled Derek Chauvin off of him. Plain and simple. And their failure to stop him from what clearly was a murder, because, if he did it for 1 minute, I can understand not reacting. But for 9 minutes after the man pleaded for his life and said he couldn't breathe, and for several minutes after he became unresponsive, they watched while he killed him, while he snuffed the life out of him. That makes them guilty of a felony. They will be prosecuted for it. This is in no way indicative of, your average police officer that maybe doesn't know what to do in a situation.
Ken, I see you chomping at the bit, and everybody's watching now, so
okay.
they can see this emotion we talk about.
Okay. There is a mitigating factor in law when someone reacts to a situation without intent. You can be negligent and you can be reckless. This was neither one of them. I'm sorry. This wasn't a police officer who was by himself walking down a dark alley and he saw two muzzle flashes and returned fire and actually hit a bystander who he couldn't see.
Right.
Okay? That's an accident. And it may not even qualify as manslaughter, even though it was clearly reckless. This is someone who had a suspect for a non-violent offense on the ground where the suspect was not armed with a firearm or any object that could cause harm, and he had his knee up against his neck for 9 minutes. Right. Okay? It's 7:22 right now. Start the clock. Stop me when 9 minutes happens. Okay, Sinister One? Let's see how long 9 minutes is. Not only that, there were 3 officers who were there who could have assisted him if the suspect became out of control. Okay, no, this was not an accident. I'm sorry.
That's right.
And this is the most important thing. This was not an isolated event with this officer. He had 19 prior excessive force complaints in his jacket. And this is something that drives me crazy. And I use this statistic all the time, and most police officers will even agree with me. 90% of the use of force complaints are generally directed against 10% of any given police force.
Yep.
Okay? 90% of the problems are 10% of the people. Sinister One, you have been a blue-collar manager, as you like to say, for over 20 years.
Yes, correct.
If you had 10% of your workforce that was garnering 90% of the complaints, I don't care what it's for, what would happen to those individuals? They still have a job?
They'd fit discipline. They would have discipline. If they had that many, to be honest, if they had that many, they'd already probably be out the door, because your first thing is a verbal warning, and then if they commit an offense again, it's a written warning. Then after it's a written warning, it's a suspension. If you have a 4th offense after being suspended, the next thing you have to do is you have to see how bad the offense is, which allows you to skip to 3-day, the 5-day, the 10-day, and you could go right to a 30-day with pending discharge. And that's how it was at the MBTA.
There you go.
Once you got that first suspension, you can jump.
Okay, but that's my point. The idea that this was some kind of accident with the officer with this kind of record is absolutely and completely preposterous. Okay? This wasn't an officer who was in a darkened alley by himself who'd just been shot. This was broad daylight, 4 officers, 1 unarmed defendant who was accused of a non-violent offense. And we don't even know if he did it. Okay, let's start with that. Hold on,
real quick, because we have some people asking in the chat on that. they wanted to know why would 911 even respond to a counterfeit $20 bill call? Isn't that just a simple?
Well, 911 well, again, it depends on what resources are available. If they have officers in the area, if they're not doing anything else, and yeah, they'll probably show up and take a investigation about what's going on. I'm a little surprised that 4 officers showed up. Again, that's one of the things that bothered me. There were 4 police officers showing up for what is in essence a minor theft crime.
Mm-hmm.
Tells me they were already there looking for something. And that's the problem. A lot of the times is these police officers are there for something. They don't find what they're looking for, they'll find this.
And I have a question.
Yeah.
And I have a question for Squid from somebody in the chat. They wanted to know about, couldn't they be charged with capital murder, him or the other 3?
You certainly could. It when you charge that, obviously it ups the ante significantly, and it makes the case far more complicated. In the case of Derek Chauvin, there is at least the possibility. Now, to do that, to win a capital case, they would actually have to prove every element of first-degree murder, and they would have to prove that he had the intent to kill him. And I think I could prove that, but when you do it in a capital setting, there are all kinds of extra things that have to happen, and it makes the case far more complicated. And it's usually, to use the colloquial expression, the juice isn't worth the squeeze. And I'm not against capital punishment. I have concerns about it, but it's part of our system, and I have advocated its use, and I've also advocated its not use in cases. And I think it needs to be used sparingly and only in the most aggravating of cases. To a lot of people, this may be the most aggravating of cases. I don't know that the fact pattern, I don't know if it would lend itself because of, Ken knows this as an attorney, but, you've got all kinds of aggravating factors and all kinds of additional things that come into play. I don't think we have time nearly enough to cover that on the show. For Derek Chauvin, it would at least be a possibility. I don't know. I don't know if it's worth it in this case, not because of George Floyd, just because of the way that the evidence is at the moment.
I agree. I mean, to get a capital murder case on this, you got to prove that before the officer actually laid a finger on Mr. Floyd, that was intent to kill him. I just don't think you can prove that. I think murder 1 is going to be a tough road to hoe, and I'm speaking as a criminal defense attorney. Murder 2, no question about it. I think in a perfect world, he should be charged with murder 1 and convicted. I just don't think that there's going to be enough stomach to convict a police officer wearing a uniform in line of duty of first-degree murder in these particular circumstances. So if I was prosecuting, I would go with murder 2 only because that's a slam dunk. And you can get a substantial sentence, although you couldn't get a death sentence. And I'm not sure if Minnesota has a death sentence. I don't know. I have not checked. That's what we talk about.
Paul Forrest just dropped in the chat. He said civil rights charges were brought against the police department today. So
well, that was by the state of Minnesota. They brought what under their law. This is a Minnesota thing, so I'm not an expert in it. But what Minnesota has is a human rights statute similar to the federal civil rights statute, and so this was a human rights violation against the police department. Quite frankly, it's a stunt. It's premature at best. It's the state's way of trying to get ahead of this and being on the right side of the protests and the anger and what have you. I don't know that there's enough evidence about the police department yet on this. You certainly have more than enough evidence on these officers, and I think those cases ought to be the priority right now. But I guess that's really all I could say about it. I don't think it's a meaningful step. I think it's more of a political step.
I think I agree with part of that. I agree that it's definitely a political step and may have been somewhat premature. However, I think the fact that you've got a police officer with 19 excessive force complaints on his jacket and still going out there is an indication that this police department has some problems, and maybe the state has known about it and done nothing, which is inexcusable. But maybe they said this is the straw that broke the camel's back and we need to send a message. I'm not so sure I would do it right now because this would probably ratchet up the tension instead of de-escalate is what we need right now. But then again, not my call. I'm not the AG of Minnesota yet.
Well, no, you're actually right. Those are great points. I guess my point is I don't know if the police department's failure to act properly in supervising Derek Chauvin as far as not properly handling those complaints, because I don't know what the bases. I know that there were probably a significant percentage of them that were founded. Some of them may not have been. So I don't have enough of the facts. But I would say that I don't know if that constitutes a human rights, if that meets the statute of a human rights violation, which is another problem. But
well, I do know from this, strictly speaking, from the civil side, not the criminal side, but the civil side is if a department is aware that you have an officer that has had an excessive number of excessive force complaints against any protected class, that does constitute for civil purposes a civil rights violation. Matter of fact, here in Brockton, they got sued a number of years ago for that very same thing. Mm-hmm. They were aware of a number of officers who were doing this, and they weren't taking the appropriate steps, and they got sued by a colleague of mine, a woman I know very, very well, and she was successful. That was how she was successful. Again, that's a civil rights. That's a civil. That's going to sound a little ridiculous. The civil rights violation was involved in civil litigation, not criminal litigation, and the standard is completely and utterly different. And don't mix up the two. So I'll be very clear what I'm saying.
Right.
So this is a tough case moving forward, as we said. Like I mentioned earlier, they're already talking about the officers possibly pleading the fifth. We'll see what's going to happen here. The problem is and I want to say something about this whole thing too, is that Minnesota has yet to heal. A lot of people don't remember that they hadn't even healed from the whole Philando Castile incident. This was a black man who not only was armed, he was a legal gun owner. He was a legal gun owner, shot in front of his daughter and his girlfriend in the car after he had told the Minnesota police officers that he had a weapon on him, a firearm, he was legally carrying, and the officer, who still was in fear, he ended up shooting him to death. And they had yet to recover. The police commissioner that's in place now, there was some other civil leader that had spoke. A lot of these people who are in place right now were all put in because everybody else was run out of town due to this whole Philando Castile thing. So they were already under this heat. They were already under this tension. And this just kind of added to this whole thing. And like the commissioner said, we had been going in a positive direction, that this just took everything off track. And that's why this is such a tragedy, because it's happening in a place. Because
Philando Castile was a horrific case. That's one of the cases I teach in my courses, or that I use as illustrations in my courses. Mm-hmm. And that's just a horrific case. It's one of the worst ones out there, just on the facts and everything. But what's interesting about that, as you said, the police chief of that organization has been on the job 1 month, and came up from Houston, where he was in Dallas, where he was an assistant, and had done some good work in Dallas. So they brought him up to Minneapolis, and he was starting to do some good things. But clearly, that 1 month may sound like a lot of time. It's really not in a bureaucracy, as I'm sure you guys know, and most of our listeners would know. Bureaucracies move real slow. That's a shame. But so the police chief was moving in the right direction. He just didn't have nearly enough time before this happened.
Ken, you want to add to that?
No, other than to say that I absolutely agree with what R Squared just said.
All right, so we're going to continue on. That part of the medical examiner stuff, that was all part of the legal booth. Now we're going to get into the Trump troubles, which still continues in with this discussion that we're having over George Floyd. One of the things that Trump has done during this time is that, we've been looking for a lot of people to step up and speak. President Obama has spoken some great words involving this matter. Former President George Bush has come out today, has released a statement on the matter, some encouraging words from him. Hillary Clinton, everybody has stepped up and has just drawn some words of standing together and fighting this whole thing. While President Trump has taken a complete 180, he has yet to stand up and speak to the masses the way that he should. And every time I think that this guy is going to step up and use something to redeem himself, he does things where he kind of not put his foot in his mouth, but I think he just makes himself look worse. What scares me is that you look at the people who are his followers, his Trump Americans, as we call them, and it's almost to the point now where you listen and watch these people and see the things they write, and you realize, man, they are sounding like cultists now. And it's like he really is right. He really can't do any wrong. So, for example, Washington had their own set of riots, and President Trump was in his bunker. But he was in his bunker. Instead of coming out and speaking to people, he comes out and he's tweeting about, well, if they get through my walls, they're going to be met with dogs and ominous weapons. And it's like, it's unprofessional. It's just horrifying to see this. Then you find out that he cleared out the protesters so he could get a photo op at a freaking church, to go there, hold a Bible,
upside
and
down.
Photo op. Oh, Ken's all over. He's like, he held it upside down. Ken was all over.
Oh yeah.
But even the pastor of the church came out and said it was disgusting. You came here, you utilized my place, and you utilized the Bible as a prop. And for those who don't think how strong those words are coming from a pastor, ask your church. Go to church and find out why those words are so strong. And it's coming once again. It's also a separation of church and state. He's utilizing the church for a photo op. I'm gonna let you. I just can't. Ken, look at Ken. Ken's ready. Oscar, I'm gonna let you go first. I want Ken to say. Oh, hold on, guys. We're at 9 minutes.
We're past 9 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there you go.
We're like 4 minutes.
That's how long he had it. That's how long he has his knee on his neck. Okay.
Yeah.
That's
Oscar, I'm gonna let you go
point.
first, because Ken. I see Ken is just chomping at the bit. Oscar.
Yeah. Well, I was going to let. I mean, I'm happy to go. I was going to let Ken go because it looks like he's bored over there. But
oh no, I can tell Ken's filing.
He's got his nail file out, so I don't know if he's trying to,
Ken's got
open
a lot
his jail
to say.
cell or
This
what.
is my Dr. Evil. I'm about to dump you in the pond full of piranhas. Look.
Yeah. So I'll tell you what. I'll take a specific aspect of this, and I'll leave a lot of it for Ken, so we don't say the same thing. Because
hold on a second. First, for those who are new and listening to the show, I got to let you guys know Ken's a defense attorney. Oscar is a JAG officer in the military, and let's say when Oscar retired, when he joined this show. It was around the time that President Trump was elected, and at that time, Oscar was very respectful for his commander-in-chief. But as these years have gone on, I mean, right before our eyes, if you listen to all of our podcasts, you will see that the layers of R² has kind of shed it off. And he's been very vocal about this commander-in-chief to the point where he says he's been criticized at times. But it just... And these were his exact words. There comes a time where you have to say enough is enough. And if you want to take this time to just kind of explain that, because I'm curious to what you're going to say.
Well, what I wanted to talk about, you asked us to talk about the stunt that he pulled where he walked across Lafayette Park to the church. And I want to cover a specific aspect of that. I posted a piece on it this morning, and so I'm going to talk about that for a minute, and then I'll pass it to Ken, and then I'll come back and probably agree with everything Ken says. But because we talked about this before. But the thing that struck me, obviously there were two things. There was the complete violation of the Constitution by which they dispersed the protesters to enable him to do that stunt. And I think that's what Ken wants to talk about. I'm going to leave that aside for now. I may come back to it after. Yes, I know. So I want to talk about a different aspect of that, because there were a couple of things that, if you've watched the video coverage of it, the president not only took that walk across Lafayette Park to the church, to St. John's Episcopal Church, but right behind him were at least part of his cabinet, including the Secretary of Defense, Mark Esper, Attorney General William Barr, of course, and a couple of other people, and among them was Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Mark Milley, 4-star General Mark Milley, who, now for those of you who don't know what the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs or the Joint Chiefs are, they are the senior members of the military who come out of the Pentagon, they come out of their traditional roles as military leaders, and they serve as advisors to the president. Their duties are to give him their best military advice, and to advise the Secretary of Defense. The Secretary of Defense can then issue guidance down through the Pentagon so that the various commanders can do whatever missions are assigned to them. Two things happen with General Milley that I think are important to note. That's why I want to cover that and leave it at that for now. General Milley walked with the president in that stunt yesterday, and that to me was a gross deviation from the customs, norms, rules and regulations and requirements of a military officer, especially a senior military officer. Shame on General Mark Milley for doing that. Either he is a complete fool or he has become the latest casualty in Trump's war on integrity, and Milley is either he's a complete fool and didn't know what was going on, or he sacrificed his integrity to become a politician in service of Donald Trump. And this is not about whether you agree or disagree with Donald Trump. This is about the military rules and requirements that Milley, in my opinion, grossly violated. And I've heard some others this afternoon say that. I posted my piece this morning. I was first. But the point is that military officers must be nonpartisan, must be nonpolitical in the execution of their duties in their official capacities. You can have opinions privately, you can speak about them privately, but in your official duties, in your official capacity, in your uniform, you cannot ever be part of partisan politics. Even when you're advising the president, you give your best military advice. You are not there to help the president get elected or not get elected, for that matter. It's neither pro nor con. General Milley participated in what was an absolute partisan political stunt. It was for the Trump campaign, Trump 2020. They had the footage up immediately. They put the ridiculous music, the tough guy music, marching music that they put in the background, that they added into the video of him walking across, and the imagery of him holding up the Bible, that he, quite frankly, desecrated the Bible and desecrated the church by what he did. And Milley was right there with them doing it. That is, some people may say, what's the big deal? For a military officer, that is a big deal. General Milley crossed a significant line. People lower in rank to him who did far less than that have ended their careers with reprimands for doing stuff like that. And here Milley did it brazenly. And then after that stunt, here's the other piece of this that people may not know. Shortly after that stunt, a couple of hours later, it was dark out. There was video footage, and this could be taken somewhat out of context, but it happened. General Milley, in his same combat uniform, not his dress uniform that he's normally supposed to wear when he goes to the White House, his combat uniform that Trump asked him to wear, he was walking the streets, and the caption was, he was patrolling the streets in supervision because the president named him as the point person, as the person in charge of the riot response for the country. That is an impermissible use of military and a military leader. You can talk about the Posse Comitatus Act, but you can talk about all kinds of rules and regulations. I don't want to monopolize the next hour of your lives by explaining them to you. Trust me about it. You'll have to take my word for it. I can point you to sources if you want to read about it. Milley should not be in that position. He should have known better. And the fact that he was then filmed patrolling D.C. as if he was taking it all in and in his supervising of the riot response. So you have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff in a gross departure, an unexcusable departure. He needs to be removed from that position immediately. He needs to do the right thing and resign, or he needs to do the right thing and correct his behavior. Because I don't know how you get the chairman of the Joint Chiefs out. Nobody outranks him in uniform. But this is a gross violation, and so as bad as I know I'm going to agree with everything Ken says about the stunt itself and how it started and what it symbolizes. Milley should never have been there. He cannot and should not be serving as Trump's point man on riot response. That's a political job, and if this is what we're doing, then this is a grave breach of our national security. This is a grave breach of our democracy. This is what the military has not been allowed to do, and I think people need to be alarmed that they're doing it.
And the sad thing is R-squared, a lot of people didn't catch that. A lot of people don't know that was wrong. A lot of people.
That's why I wrote about it today, because people need to know.
A lot of people don't. Yes, and they don't know that. Do you think that General Milley will catch hell behind the scenes from others I mean, he's at the top of the food chain pretty much. So,
yeah.
Who would be the one to call him out if he's at the top of the food chain?
Well, here's the problem: the Senate Armed Services Committee.
Yep.
And we know who runs that.
Let people know. We know.
Well, I mean, you've got people like Lindsey Graham and other Trump sycophants and enablers who they're just not going to do their job.
Yeah.
Normally, no matter who the administration was, no matter who was in charge of Congress, you would have had the Armed Services Committee up in arms over this and having hearings about it and demanding answers to it. And now, crickets.
Ken, I see you. It's your floor.
Sorry, Ken, didn't mean to take so much time.
No. First of all, I agree with everything R Square said. And for those of you who have not yet read R Square's article, you really should, because it goes into depth about why this is a problem. And I will not explain that. He did a better job of that than I ever could. And also, this is a man who's spent 24 years in uniform and is also a legal officer. So he knows what he's talking about, boys and girls. Okay, now on to me. Before I begin, I think it's very important to understand the geography of where this incident took place. For those of you who have never been to D.C., the White House is located at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. Right across from Pennsylvania Avenue, there is a park called Lafayette Park. It's named for the Marquis Lafayette. And if you don't know who that is, shame on you for not knowing your American history, but he was a French nobleman who was very critical in delivering and aiding Washington's troops with French aid. Okay, there's also a very famous statue not of Lafayette, but Andrew Jackson in the middle of Lafayette Park. Lafayette Park has been the site of virtually every single civil demonstration for 250 years. It is one of the most common places to have a demonstration, probably second only to the mall in D.C. So this is a place that is very used to hosting political demonstrations and activities. What happened was there was a peaceful demonstration. I want to be absolutely clear when I say this. There was no rioting, no looting, no fires of any sort. There was no threats to the Washington, D.C. peace and security or to the White House. There were no threats to the president. What happens is President Trump's goon squad, his Gestapo, came in with armed guards, tear gas, and tanks and cleared people out so they could use a political event of him walking across Lafayette Park. That's disgusting. That's abuse of power. That's impeachment right then and there. You have absolutely no right to clear out people because you happen to politically disagree with them if they're not posing a threat. Not only that, it was stupid! One of the first things that anyone will tell you about crowd control, I don't care if you're a police officer or if you're in civil authority, and Rob worked civil affairs when he was in the military, is if you've got a tense situation, the last thing you want to do is ratchet up the pain. You want to de-escalate. You want to calm things down. I'm sorry, rolling a bunch of people with tanks and tear gas in the middle of a nationally tense situation is just stupid. That's the equivalent of walking up to a campfire and dumping gasoline on it. Okay? Now let's talk about what he did. He walks across this Lafayette Park, then goes to a church, which, by the way, did not invite him. That's the other thing that pisses me off. This church didn't want anything to do with him. And then take a photo op with a Bible holding it upside down. Okay? Now, this escaped my notice because in Judaism, I'm Jewish myself, and so is R Square. If you hold the Bible upside down, it's really you're being an idiot, but there's no theological significance to this. Apparently, I talked to a couple of my friends who are much more familiar with Christian theology than I am, were absolutely aghast, and this is the reason, because according to them, that is, from the Middle Ages, a renunciation of Christ and his teachings. Basically, it's the equivalent of being a devil worshiper, which may explain why Trump was able to hold the Bible out of burning his hands, which I thought was very interesting. Now, granted, I'm no expert on Christian theology, but that's what I was told. That's why they were aghast. I think he's just a freaking idiot and a hypocrite. Because this last time this man was in a church was he got married to his, fourth wife? Is he on wife number 4 or wife number 3?
That could not have been a church wedding.
You don't think it was a church wedding? You don't think he paid someone? Okay.
Well, they may have had somebody, but I'm sure it was just in some fancy place. I bet they were not in a church. Anyway, not a point.
I know more about Christian theology than Trump does, and I'm a Jew. Okay? I've probably been to more church events than he has. But that's issue for another day. This is absolutely and utterly disgusting, and this is what gets into my point before was Trump and his people want these riots. They want these burnings. They are doing everything they possibly can to ratchet up the tension so they have an excuse to go in with force. Now, for those of you who are maybe familiar with something called the Reichstag fire analysis, and what that is that came when the Nazis were gaining power, they got a Dutch communist to light a fire, or allegedly light a fire in the Reichstag, and burned it to the ground with the German parliament, so the Nazis could enact the laws for relieving the suffering of the German people and to restore law and order, more commonly known as the Nuremberg laws. If you don't know what that is, look it up on Google. And this is exactly what they're trying to do. Unfortunately, they're doing a very bad job of it because there's been a huge amount of pushback. And I am very happy to see that. But this is what happens when you elect a trouser stain with no intellectual curiosity and no governmental experience to the highest position in the land. And for those of you, like my good friend R Squared, no, I actually have not had any alcohol since Rob and I had our virtual happy hour about a week ago. Because for various health-related reasons, and chief among them is, if you think I'm bad when I'm sober, you should imagine what I am when I've got a few drinks in me, and I really wanted to tell you what I think.
Well, the funny thing is, too, is that, so now that we're broadcasting video live, Osquid's emojis and messages that he's putting up here for us to see are coming up for everybody else to see, so.
Oh, even the chat? I thought the chat was private.
No, the chat is the video. But it's still funny because the beer can, whatever. But wow, Ken, you're pretty kind of tame on that one.
Well, we're doing the thing live, so I can't go full diesel. I got to be a little sedate.
You can still go full diesel. It's just the language part of it.
That's part of the
diesel experience.
Full diesel. But I'm trying to be nice. I'm trying to, again, follow my own advice. I'm trying to de-escalate the crisis. I want us to have a calm, cerebral discussion about this. There are some problems, and maybe throwing firebombs in this particular instance is not the smartest thing I can do.
We got more people in the chat. Jessica Studley, what's going on? Safalo, Felicia Damon, what's going on? Hopefully Brockton is still at peace right now. It's 8:00. I haven't heard anything. It was kind of scary to see everything all boarded up when I was driving around because everybody was so scared. I just had a little bit more faith. One of the things I wanted to touch base on with also Trump that he's kind of under fire for. I do have to applaud Trump a little bit. I do have to applaud Trump a little bit because I'm a science guy. I'm a big fan of space and space travel, NASA. I'm a big fan of that. And one of the things Trump did say that he was going to do when he took office was that he was going to put some money into NASA and put people back into space and on the moon. This past weekend, Donald Trump's monies and promise did come true. They did put people in space. They had their first rocket take off in 6 years, I think it was. And I was very happy to see it went off without a hitch. And you know what? I applaud him for that, and I got to give credit where credit is due. But then when you try to give somebody credit, they turn around and do. Then they turn around and do the things that they do. So you try to give the guy credit. Some of the things that I was unhappy with was, Nancy Pelosi come right out and ripped them apart on some issues, but to be honest, she hadn't spoken prior to this herself. So I was kind of like, well, where were you? You haven't released anything else. So I was kind of up in arms there with that situation. But again, I think he, as a president, as a leader, he completely dropped the ball again. And I'm sorry, there's a lot of people now saying he's not going to get in November. I think his cultist, his Trump Americans guy, I hate to say this, I think he's still a shoo-in over Biden. I think his silent majority right now is so locked in on him, and that's the scary thing, guys. Go ahead, Ken. You're covering your face, but I'm scared. I am scared. I don't think.
Okay, for the 400th, 23rd, 1000th time. Let's do the math. How many votes did Trump get versus... Let me ask that question. I'm going to rephrase it.
The popular vote or electoral vote?
Quiet. Silence, my Padawan. Which number is bigger? The votes that Trump got or the votes that Clinton got? Hillary. I'm hearing crickets. Okay. So, let's start with that. Okay. So we admit that less people supported Donald Trump than Hillary Clinton. Number one. Game this out.
Go ahead, continue.
4 states: Pennsylvania, Ohio, Michigan, Florida. For the purpose of the Electoral College, not the popular vote, if Trump had lost one of those states, would he still be president today?
No, because I remember 1:23 a.m. was when the Michigan votes came in, and all of a sudden it was like a switch flipped, and it was like, Jesus Christ, this guy is going to take it. I remember that moment.
All right, very good. Sinista1, you're red hot. You're 2 for 2. Do you want to bank your money, or do you want to go for the $1 million prize?
I'm going to go for the $1 million prize. Because I remember that night like the back of my hand. Everything about that night.
Yeah.
From Omarosa coming out on stage and texting Ken at 2:30 in the morning. Can you believe he's got Omarosa? She's going to end up being in the White House cabinet. And Ken said, no, she's not going to get a job in the White House. And sure enough, she did.
Yeah, she did. I had to eat a lot of crow on that one. You were right about that. I'm going to eat crow on that one. So, now, has anyone looked at the polls recently for 5 states? The 5 states: Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, Ohio, and Florida. Has anyone looked at any state polls in those 5 states?
3 of those I saw, and I saw Biden was ahead by maybe 2% in some of those states.
Very good. Now, assuming those numbers hold, there's no guarantee they will Trump be president in 2020? I'm hearing crickets.
I'm not going to answer because I already said my opinion, so I'm just going to let...
Okay. No. I agree with part of what you said. I think you're correct in your analysis of the Trump cultists. I agree with that they're going to back him till, the Mashiach shows up, or the second coming, as you folks like to call it. Okay? And I agree. But as I've been arguing since 2016, the people that support him, or let me rephrase that, the hardcore supporters represent a minority of the Republican Party, not to mention a minority of the electorate, even the ones that vote. And they're not enough to put him in office. The reason he won was he got the great middle ground. He got the Reagan Democrats, the Clinton Republicans, the Perot voters. Call them what you want. I call them the mushy middle. And he doesn't have them this time. He's doing incredibly poor with seniors. And let me ask you this, Sinista1. If you're trying to get elected to any office, and okay, Rob just put up this. Rob can't do it because I get all these tears. And I look over there, and Rob's got these emojis down. And I lose my train of thought. Okay, so if you need people in Florida to vote for you, or a majority of the people in Florida vote for you, what's one important group that you shouldn't want to piss off in Florida?
Oh, nationwide, it's the elderly, which is the reason why we don't retest anybody at 65 for driver's licenses.
Right. Good. I would have taken Hispanics as well, but, I'm going with the elderly as well. Have you seen the poll numbers of Trump approval ratings with people over the age of 65 recently?
I'm expecting after this whole COVID thing and how he's handled this, I would say anybody over 65 is probably flipped back towards Biden now.
Very good.
Yeah.
Let's put it this way. Let me pull a baseball reference out for you. I'd have more luck walking into a bar or restaurant in Kenmore Square in September wearing a Yankees cap than Trump would have getting elderly votes in Florida next November. Okay? And do you think he's going to be able to pull off a Florida victory without the elderly?
No, not where he's talking about taking money from Social Security too.
Yeah. Before this whole COVID and the riots occurred, how was the economy doing for working class people, blue collar people, especially truckers and people like that? How was it doing for them?
Well, it was kind of in between me. It was horrible for most of us, but there were some people who were seeing he was getting credit for a lot of things that were in place prior to him taking office. So that was where we had this strong base believing in him.
But the manufacturing jobs weren't coming back. As a matter of fact, remember that plant, the carrier plant that he was so proud of in the campaign?
Indiana. Yep, so, Indiana. Closed a year later.
Vote. And let's talk about how the blacks love me comment, okay? You know, if you're a white guy, you should never say that, ever. There are certain words and phrases you shouldn't use as a white man. I'm saying this as a 53-year-old white guy, okay? And he said, look, let's talk about, I mean, leaving aside the way he's mishandled this whole situation, do you think anyone would vote for this man? Seriously. So, who's going to vote for this guy come November? Seriously, break me down the people are going to vote for this guy.
Definitely his Trump Americans and definitely his silent majority, unfortunately. And the question here is I've always said this. I said that he's catering to, like, he's the same week that he said that about the blacks, he said gays like him too. It was 3 days later he said gays like him. And I was like, wow, that's kind of offensive.
Let's look at it this way. He's lost the Northeast. He's lost the West Coast. He's probably lost Florida. He's lost Middle America. Who's got left? He's got the South.
Yeah, I think the South. I think part of the South is a lock for him still. That whole Bible.
I agree.
I think the South, the Alabamas, the Mississippis, I think they don't care. I think they're going to stick right by him.
But again, Obama didn't win the South either. He got elected president twice, if I recall. I have some vague recollections of that.
Mm-hmm.
I had some vague, recollections in my group therapy session of, having a president that was, competent.
Oh, Mikey Dara just jumped in. He said it's pretty peaceful, but at City Hall, they're attacking a female police officer in her cruiser. Oh, I hope not. I hope it's not Rosie. There's not many female police officers on the Brockton Police Force, so hopefully it's not what I think. So go ahead, continue on.
Okay, and I'll end my rant on that. But also, I know we're running a little over time. Let me say something about these riots. And this is what I wanted to say. Unfortunately, I wasn't sure where to say it, so I'll say it now. I'm very angry about how it's being portrayed that these demonstrations have become riots. No, they have not become riots. What happens is you have four distinct groups involved. You have the protesters, the police, the people who are rioting, and the people that are looting. Don't mix up those four groups because they're not the same. Number one, you have the protesters. Those protesters are peacefully assembling to seek a redress of grievances as guaranteed in all 50 state constitutions and our federal constitution. By the way, each state has its own constitution, in case you didn't know that. Number one, there are people out there who are causing trouble. These are the people lighting fires and breaking windows for whatever reason. Some of them are political, some of them are just freaking jerks. And some of them are agent provocateurs. We know that already. We've been able to find these people who came in from out of state, and they were sent in by right-wing groups to cause problems. Some of them are some hardcore left-wing groups, whatever. They were not there to protest. Okay? The third group is the people who are looting. And these are opportunists. These are just common criminals who just saw confusion and they want to get their Xbox or whatever. They are not part of the protesters. The last group is in certain cases, not all, the police have overreacted and, like I said before, came across a campfire and dumped gasoline on it. Let us not equate all four groups equally. Okay, and that's my little bit. R squared is chomping at the bit, as you like to say, Sinister1, because I've been dominating or monopolizing the conversation for a good 20 minutes. I apologize. So I yield the remainder of my time to the gentleman from Florida.
No, I don't have anything. I don't have a lot to add to that. I would say as far as the protests and riots go, first of all, I think that's true, that you have to look at the groups distinctly, as you pointed out. So I totally agree with that. I think the problem that you have from as far as what is the impact, I don't know how many people will take the time to really think it through the way you laid out. Most people might watch a few minutes of news and form incorrect assumptions, or they're going to believe the fake news that comes out of the White House. And so what you have is an interesting problem, because whether it's right or whether it's wrong, when this event first happened, you really did have a national groundswell all in favor of these protests on this issue. And then what normally does tend to happen is when people see the violence, even if it's not caused by those people, it's associated with the protest because it's happening in that context. And so people are losing interest, saying, well, see, this is what happens, and now I don't really care about either side, or what have you. And so it loses its momentum, it loses its support, or at least it minimizes. It doesn't lose everything, but there's certainly a negative impact on that, and that's the real problem. And I know, because we've seen it in the video evidence. This is why in what I wrote this morning, thanks for your kind words on that, Ken, but that's why I was telling people you must demand to see the evidence, not the evidence against Derek Chauvin, but when these leaders are telling you who's doing what to who in these protests and what have you, demand the proof. But don't listen that it's Antifa, because Antifa is not even an organization. Don't listen that it's the protesters. Don't listen. You need to look for yourself at the video. Demand that the people who are making speeches show the video. My point is that what you could see in a lot of cases are protesters who, in my opinion, are being a little bit too aggressive with the police, because, again, the police who are there are probably the good ones, right? That's not who they're not putting the bad ones on the line in a situation like this. Those people are hiding in the police station right now under wraps. So you've got a lot of police officers that are trying to do the right thing under very difficult situations. Some of them are obviously not, but most of them are trying to. And what's happening is the protesters are getting right up in their faces. Okay, and that's not necessarily a crime. You can yell at the police, you can shake your finger, you can hold your signs, you can do your chants. You can't throw things at the police, and you can't physically touch the police. In fact, you can't do that to anybody. And so that's where the line gets crossed. What's happening is the provocateurs, as Ken was saying, are standing a couple of rows behind the lead protesters, and they're doing it from there. They're the ones throwing things at the police officers, so it looks like it's the actual protest leaders doing it when it's these outside agitators that are sneaking in. Now, let's face it, some of them are the protesters doing it. They're angry. They're making bad decisions, and they're committing crimes. So it's not all outside agitators. But what I'm saying is they're hijacking this movement that needs to be heard. And that's the real shame of it right now. And so, the police obviously need to use the maximum restraint that they can use to try to figure out who's actually doing this, and not just start, taking action against all the protesters. At the same time, the protesters need to do a better job, no pun intended, of policing themselves, because they can't be allowing their protests to be used by provocateurs who are attacking the police. Okay, they just can't, because at the end of the day, while we want the police to use maximum restraint, and that means even being hit by some things before taking action, at the end of the day, some of the videos that we've seen where the crowds are surrounding police officers and beating them is unacceptable. Where crowds are surrounding the police cruisers and trying to pull the police officers out of the cruisers to beat them is unacceptable. And that's why they start driving away, and because some of them are genuinely in fear because they've seen the video where other police officers are being beaten. And I know that sounds funny, like how could you beat police officers? They're they're not all fully equipped like that, and when you separate them from the pack, they're vulnerable. And so what I want to say is this needs to be a peaceful process. There's an important message here. I agree with it 100%. And I'm totally in support of what the protesters and the message, and that they need to be heard, and it's high time. But the entire assemblage needs to do a better job of stopping the violence, because it will cost the movement its message. Whether that's right or wrong, whether that's fair or not, that's the truth.
Yeah, it defers the whole message, and you guys are completely right. And I've said that, and I came under fire because I posted a very emotional post, telling people, hey, I get it. We can protest, but the violence is not worth it. And I pretty much said to people, from speaking as a black man who's been involved with the black community, one of the things I said is if we want to put this energy in, use the same energy that you use when you want to buy a pair of Jordans and you line up outside the store and spend $200. Use the same energy. And one of the things I pointed out that some people didn't like hearing, I says everybody wants to complain, but nobody wants to show up to city council meetings.
Right. Yes.
Everybody, and Ken can speak for this one because he's a defense attorney. Every black person pretty much who gets arrested will tell you, oh, man, I'm not going to get a fair trial. Well, you know why? They tell your brother and sister and your cousins who sit back, and when they get that jury duty letter form and turn around and say, oh, I don't want to do jury duty, you don't show up to jury duty, guess what? You don't have a jury of your peers if you don't show up to jury duty. Because there's so many people I know when I'm sitting in the barbershop, they get that little white form for jury duty, and they say, oh, I'm going to do whatever I can to get out of this. No, you shouldn't be doing everything you get out of this. You didn't even have a right to go to jury duty years ago. Now you've got that right. So your ass should be going to jury duty. Because I can tell you right now, a lot of the white guys and stuff that work for me, when they get jury duty, they come right to my office with that little white paper. And they're like, look, I got jury duty. Bam, that's my day off. And hopefully they call me and tell me I'm not going to get put on the case because I still get paid for the day. And Ken, you can speak on that. How many times have you seen black people show up and come up with excuses they'll show up to jury duty and have excuses as to why they shouldn't be picked.
Yeah. Unfortunately, that happens across races, genders, and ethnicities. But I agree with you. I mean, I have been called for jury duty twice in my life. And one time I didn't even make the veneer. And the other time I did make the veneer and they kicked me off the moment they found out I was a lawyer, especially a criminal defense attorney. I want to serve on a jury. I do. I always had. It's been one of my goals in life. I doubt I ever will, at least until maybe when I retire. Because no lawyer wants another lawyer on the jury. No. But yeah, this is your responsibility. And you were right. One of the key things in the civil rights movement was fighting for the right to have blacks on juries. In fact, one of the things we do right now is one of the objections is, when you have an all-white jury and you have a black defendant or a person of color, that bothers the hell out of me. It always does. And I raise that issue, and most of the time it gets ignored. But that's the way it is. And again, and R Squared put it in the thing, vote, 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 and I couldn't agree with you more. I am so sick of hearing this, and this is something that I've heard, I'm sure you've all heard it too, is, oh, my vote doesn't matter, the fix is in, no matter what I do, I'm going to get... No! It does matter! Okay? Quote my beloved father, if you don't vote, the idiots take over. And even when you do vote, the idiots sometimes take over, but it's more difficult for them. If the amount of people who came out to support Obama came out to support Hillary, guess who would be president right now? Okay? Mm-hmm. There's no excuse. I have voted in every election since 1984, which is the first election I could vote in. Okay? I voted in federal elections, state elections, local elections. Okay? There is no, if you're 18 or above, there is no excuse for you not to be registered and not to be voting, and I don't want to hear it. Go in there and write in Bugs Bunny as a writing candidate if you don't like any of the candidates. That's fine. If you don't like any of the candidates and you think they're all crooks and clowns, fine. Write in your own candidate and I will accept that. Because you went to the polls and you made a decision that you didn't like any of them and you're putting your own man, woman, beast in there. That's fine. I can live with that.
So
I cannot live with not going to the polls.
Quick comment on juries, if I could.
Yeah, go ahead, quick, because we got some breaking news.
Yeah, in my criminal justice class, of course, we talk about juries as one of the key pieces of the criminal justice system. And last year, in my fall semester class, I got a jury summons to be a juror. And I brought it to class. We had already spoken about juries, but I thought it would be relevant. And I brought it in there, and I told the class, and they were assuming I wasn't going to serve. And I said, no, I'm actually requesting a postponement so that I can serve between semesters, because obviously I can't do it if I'm teaching a class. I mean, they could make me, but it's not like I could just cancel class. So the students would be very happy. So I did that, and they were shocked. They were shocked that I wanted to be a juror. And I said, and by the way, I teach in a minority-majority school. So these are the people that as we're talking about, really should want to be on juries and definitely should be voting and what have you when they want to complain about the situation. But so I was trying to explain to them why I wanted to be a juror. And it was a really interesting conversation. I hope maybe, that some of that messaging got out, that this is not a bad thing. I know everybody tries to get out of it, but you should want to be a juror, especially if you're interested in the system. Go see how it works for real. Most cases don't take months and months and months. Most cases are a couple of days, right, Ken? And so,
absolutely.
So you're not giving up a lot of your time. And and plus the fact you could postpone it to a time that's more convenient. Unfortunately, there were no trials the day I was supposed to go, and I never got to serve. I would like to do it again. I want to be a juror. I have been in the past, and I would love to do it again. Now, I think one side or the other is going to kick me off because of my criminal law experience, but I would love the chance to serve on a jury, just to say that out loud.
So
if I may make that
go ahead.
comment, since I didn't even cut you off. In March, right before the COVID crisis came down, I had a major felony armed robbery case with multiple witnesses. It took us all 3 days to try the case. 2.5, actually. That was it. That's a long trial. Most cases are under. Most cases are 2 days or under. It's very rare that you have a trial that goes more than 3 days. Very rare. And those are your murder cases. That's about it. So, and we don't try that many murder cases, contrary to popular belief and television.
So before we get out of here, I know somebody had told me that if I'm on my phone, it looks ignorant, and the only reason why I'm on my phone during the live broadcast is because we have a breaking story from here in Brockton. Channel 5 was here during the rally tonight, and they were interviewing people, and Channel 5 went up to 3 young white males and asked them why they were there, and the 3 white males told Channel 5 live on TV, they said that they were there to help out, and that they were undercover EMS. And one of the kids had a tactical vest on with a backpack. The problem here is now, and I've said this before, everybody, I said if you read the book, George Orwell's 1984, the antagonist in that book was Big Brother. And everybody, if you read this book many, many years ago, 1984, you always thought that Big Brother was going to be the government. I have said this for the last 3 years. Big Brother has become us. We are Big Brother. We have the power. We have the smartphones. We are Big Brother. This is how we become so powerful. Channel 5 shares this story. Guess what happens now? Now social media is a buzz, and everybody's outing these kids. These kids are not undercover EMS. There's really no such thing as undercover EMS. And now they're sharing these kids' faces. People are outing them, saying that they went there to cause trouble. So hopefully they can identify these 3 young white males. And this is what we just was talking about on this show. This is the type of stuff that they have said, because Trump said who he thinks these people are. Everybody's throwing this around. He had said it was Antifa, but now the Department of Homeland Security has come out and says, no, it's not Antifa. It's actually white supremacist groups acting as Antifa in some of these, which is scary because everybody was saying, Trump was saying that the white supremacists had no connection to any of these. So he was obviously briefed this morning, and was blown out of the water. Before we do get out of here, there was an explanation, because I think it was Ken or R Squared. I don't know who answered this question, but people are confused out there. There was a lot of talk about what is a legit organization and what is not when it comes to terrorism and organizations, because people were tossing around BLM, Black Lives Matter, and Antifa as being these terrorist organizations. And somebody said, no, you can't qualify them as an organization, but you can qualify some of these white supremacist groups and these militias as organizations. Can you guys quickly explain the difference of that? I don't know who wants to jump on that one.
Go ahead, Ken. I'll go after you.
You sure? Because we had that discussion.
And that's why I said you go first, so that I don't monopolize the conversation, and I'll close.
Well, okay.
I think that should get out. Yeah, I think
Sister One, you may have opened a Pandora's box here, because Rob and I had a very long conversation offline today about this very exact issue.
If we got to go to 8:30, we'll go to 8:30. If we got to go to 8:30, we can go.
First of all, let's start off with the fact that Antifa is not an organization. It acts as a clearinghouse for a number of left-wing groups, both far left and immediate left. There's no central command. They share information. They're a clearinghouse. a lot of these other organizations, especially the Klan, the American Nazi Party, and other organizations have a structure where they advocate violence. They advocate violence against certain groups. They also advocate the violent. Okay, they're there to cause trouble. It's in their charter, and they're very happy to claim responsibility for violent acts, bombings, riots, murders, and they've been doing so for many. So that's very simply, and their activities have backed them up with this. So it's very easy to say, hey, this is what we stand for, this is what we do. If you want to have a definition of what a terrorist organization is, I strongly suggest you go to the DOJ's website and go to the FBI's website, and they will give you one. There's a standard right on their website. They tell you what they're looking for. Very easy to describe these hate organizations as organized terrorist groups. Because I'm sorry, when's the last time that you saw the BLM, Black Lives Matter, or any of those groups walking around to a state capitol, 15s, yelling at security personnel? Okay? Any of them do it?
No.
So that's the way I would do. I'll now yield my time to the gentleman from Florida.
Well, just two things. You know, there certainly are left-wing terrorist groups. That's for sure. Nobody owns the exclusive right to such things, but they're sort of different in their agendas and their motivation. But you know, that being said, that what you see domestically in the United States with the violent agitation tends to be the right-wing groups, at least in these days, with, what you saw in Charlottesville, what you saw in Michigan more recently, and in other protests and other situations. And so, we could use the term terrorist or not. There's really no such thing as domestic terrorism. So when people start talking about that on the media, on the news, it's really just because they're trying to put labels on something that they don't fully understand. Terrorism is terrorism, and that certainly has a definition. As Ken said, read it for yourself in the Department of Justice website. It's pretty clear, and or just Google it for that matter. And and terrorism basically means it's criminal acts. What terrorism is, it's a series of criminal acts. There's not anything that isn't criminal about terrorism to include your membership in such a group. There is no right to be in a terrorist group. And so where I wanted to talk about on this particular thing is when you have these agitations is what we've seen in this country. And let's be fair, President Trump didn't create these groups, and he didn't create racism in America, and he didn't create right-wing militias or right-wing terrorist groups. But his rhetoric, his divisiveness, his apparent embrace of such organizations has allowed them and encouraged them to be more public, to be more brazen. And so, 10, 20 years ago, I don't know if you would have seen the armed marches like we did in Charlottesville, not to the extent that we saw it. Or more importantly, maybe you wouldn't have seen the militias take over the demonstration in Michigan, because that was supposed to be just a demonstration of people's opinions on the COVID sheltering rules that the governor of Michigan and the legislature of Michigan had imposed. And instead, that by design, not by design, but by infiltration, you had people from outside of the state of Michigan, from right-wing extremist groups, whether they were white supremacist groups, which were some of them. Otherwise, you had just separatist militia groups, came from outside of the state, and there are plenty within the state, to be fair, came to basically hijack that protest, to just be anti-government, to just be disruptive, to just be destabilizing. And as far as I'm concerned, they violated the law in what they did. So to answer the question that people are asking right now is, obviously, there's protest and there's riot. A protest is your lawful expression of your views. They don't have to be popular. They don't have to be right. You have the right to express them if they're just your views. If you are engaging in violence, if you engage in a riot, that is a crime. That is not your free expression of ideas. That is a series of criminal acts where your destruction of property is not free speech. Destruction of property is a crime. Committing assault and battery against individuals is not free speech. That is a crime. And crimes like that need to be punished. And it has nothing to do with whether it was associated with an idea that may or may not be a good idea or reasonable expression. You can't conflate the two. A protest is a protest, and a criminal act is a criminal act. So what you have now is the infiltration of these protests by criminals, whether you want to call them domestic terrorist groups or what have you. These groups do not have rights. They do not have rights. Listen to R Squared. I'm saying it as plainly as day as I could say it on the air. This is not free speech. This is not a matter of constitutional rights. These are criminal organizations. They commit violence. They advocate violence. They preach violence. That's all they are about is violence. Some of it is based on demographics. Some of it is based on their refusal to recognize the authority of the federal government or their state government. Some of them is based on other separatist ideals. None of those are protected. Read the Constitution. Read the criminal code. I know we're approaching 8:30, so we can't go into a big discussion of that, but this is not a free speech issue. These are criminals. These are criminal organizations. They don't have the right to be out there interspersing with peaceful protests. They don't have the right to be marching down Charlottesville. They don't have the right to be storming the capital of Michigan. They don't have the right to look at me on the street. Because I'll tell you right now, if they look at me on the street, guess what my right is? My right is to defend myself. And these groups need to be gone. They need to be gone yesterday. And the good and decent people of the United States need to band together and say we've had enough of this. If you have viewpoints, that's fine. But if you're going to preach violence, you need to go do it somewhere else, outside of our borders.
Exactly. And by the way, because as R Square suggested, comes from the DOJ's website. The FBI defines domestic terrorism as acts perpetrated by individuals and or groups inspired by or associated with primarily U.S.-based movements that espouse extremist ideologies of political, religious, social, radical, or environmental nature. So there you go, boys and girls. That's the definition.
Yep.
Now, under the USA Patriot Act, domestic terrorism is defined as a dangerous act occurring within U.S. territory that violates criminal laws in ways that are intended to intimidate or coerce civilian population, influence the policy of government by intimidation or coercion. Guys in Michigan, are we listening? Affect the conduct of a government by mass destruction, assassination, or kidnapping.
Yeah, and the point is,
Okay.
This is terrorism. There's no difference in domestic. It's just terrorism. You can put the name domestic on it, but it's
Right.
terrorism. And what I'm saying that because I want people to understand that you're no better because you're a domestic terrorism because you have some ideal that you are following in the United States. A terrorist is a terrorist is a terrorist. If you're a terrorist, I don't care if you just don't like the governor of Michigan. If you're a terrorist, you're the same thing as Al Qaeda. You're the same thing as whatever scum lives in the most, in all these groups that we're fighting around the world. And you need to be fought and eradicated like they do.
Amen.
Good stuff, guys. I'm going to get ready to get us out of here. I'm hearing that there is some things going on, unfortunately, in the city of Brockton. I'm hearing that there is a female police officer was attacked in her cruiser at City Hall. I'm also getting reports now that the state police who are camped outside of the Brockton police station on Center Street, as they've closed off that entire block, are having things thrown at them. Look, people, there's helicopters up in the sky. They've had drones up in the sky. They're going to get pictures of everybody out there who's doing whatever. This has to remain peaceful, and it brings a horrifying answer to this whole thing. It doesn't help anybody or anyone when stuff like this happens. So I don't know. I'm just going to go around the horn and I was kind of hoping for a better result here in Brockton. I'm going to start with R Squared first.
Hey, listen, a lot of important stuff tonight. I'm glad we had the extra time to talk about it. We really only touched the surface. So listen, folks, as we used to say on this show, keep yourselves informed. You have an obligation to inform yourselves and let that information, let your research, let your analysis form your opinions. Don't be duped by other people who are pretending to be leaders. That being said, be safe out there. Take care of yourselves. Take care of your families. And, see you in the future.
Ken?
What R Square said, and what Sinista1 said, guys, go out there, protest if you want. It's your God-given right, not to mention your constitutional right, but be safe. And above all, don't incite violence. And our hopes and prayers are with everybody. And again, together, we will get through this. Together. Together, together, together. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. United we stand is what the shirt says, everybody. Look, we gotta stand together on this one. And we can't be tearing cities apart. It doesn't help anyone. And I shared this post. I said, looting and rioting is the equivalent to punching a wall. It all feels good in the moment when you do it, but unfortunately the consequences sometimes of punching a wall can last forever. And just think of it that way, people. And with that being said, SpongeBob, do me a favor and take us home.
Well, see you next Tuesday.
Thank you for listening to The Booth on Hubazoo and HatcherRadio.com. Please follow the Facebook page and subscribe to the podcast at Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, and Spotify. The Booth is a Sinista1 production hosted by Sinista1.
I've got to start hanging out with friends that are a little more intelligent and understand politics and stuff. It's just that I'm up on this level up here, and all my friends are down here. Me, nah. You guys, nah. Maybe a little more down in here. Screw you guys, I'm going home.
I smoke, I drink, I do my thing. These bitches hating, so you know I got to make it plain. Don't do cocaine with your chick, my main. We stick together, true forever, yeah, you know we bang. I miss those days, which was easy. If only I make it, bitch, don't repeat. Now that I done upgraded, I've been upstate, and y'all think I'm playing. And I got a hit now for these weak ass hoes who think I ain't slaying. Try me, and I'll probably end up laughing, cause I never back down. I'm that chick with a clean ass whip, I don't need that shit, cause I got my own now. I get hurt, I get tired of fussing, fighting, guess I gotta crack down. Don't mess with me, cause on everything, I'ma have to bring the whole city out.
WHOOBAZOO, that's Hubazoo.com.
Enter website.